Good morning, Lynn.
Hey, Annette, how are you?
A little bit frustrated. It's been crazy out there with my buyers.
Oh, you're telling me. I have a new buyer that I started working with this week who wants something that just simply is not available. Simply is not available.
Well, we're seeing the effects of limited inventory, and it's not just here in New England, it's across the country.
Yes.
I follow several groups, and some of the stories are outrageous.
Mhm.
And yet somebody said, well, look in other areas as well. It's not really as uniformly bad all over the place.
Right.
But in many parts of the country, inventory is down 20% year over year. And that's significant. There just
And
aren't.
demand, it's one of these. Demand is going crazy for a lot of reasons. COVID's changed the way we work. We want more workspace.
Yeah.
There's no question that there's a lot of pressure on demand right now.
So then the challenge is, how do we work with our buyers to stay sane, um,
Right.
to give them a good opportunity to purchase the homes that they want without increasing the risk unacceptably?
Well, some of the advice is very difficult for some buyers, especially first-time buyers, to absorb. We're
Tell me
asking
more.
a lot of them.
Tell me more.
Um, you need to be ready to spend up to 10% over the asking price. That's almost become a standard measure.
Mhm.
That's crazy. You need to be willing to assess your risks and take some risk.
What
Um,
kind of risk, especially for a
well,
first-time buyer?
you're seeing people who score the property who are so certain they can get a mortgage that they waive their mortgage contingency. Now, as a professional, boy, I would never advise my client to do so.
The only time I've kind of seen that has been with developers who
Right.
know they can get a construction loan and they waive the contingency and they get the mortgage anyway. They're not saying, I'm not going to get a mortgage, I'm just not going to worry about it.
Right. Well, and to a certain extent, the consumer has that same availability with an asterisk. So if you know that you're not going to get fired, you're your own boss, or your job is amazingly secure, you're under a contract that guarantees your job, um, that's the biggest risk you take, is that something in your life will change between the time you go under agreement with the house and the time it closes. If you lose your job, you're not going to get your mortgage and your deposit
And
up
that's
to
up to usually 5%, sometimes even
5% of the
more.
purchase price. A lot of money is at risk. So before I would ever advise a client to forego a mortgage contingency, I would want to help them with risk assessment. Is your job secure? What's the worst that could happen? If the worst happens and you lost your deposit, would it negatively impact your life in a very serious way? Nobody wants to lose money, don't misunderstand. But could you absorb such a loss? Um,
Now, another area that I see that we've always taken for granted, but people are waiving inspections.
that worries me too.
Yeah.
And yet there are some workarounds. A lot of my buyers are hiring an inspector to go to open houses with them. Now, that isn't a full inspection. They can't open the electrical panel and look inside, but they can look at basic systems, see what's going on, check the sills for termite damage. There's a lot that they can do, and a really good contractor or inspector can probably give you 60 to 75% of the information you would get from a full inspection if you're willing to forego it. If you have a relative who's a builder, bring them along. Again, it's not up to me, and I think you agree with me, to ever advise a client to forego an inspection.
Yes. And
And
and again, I'm in my 13th house since I've been married. I may be a little bit more comfortable, but I'm not sure I'm actually that comfortable that I would forego an
An
inspection.
inspection. So aside from those two rather drastic moves,
Mhm.
what I'm looking at is that there are always a few houses on the market that don't sell. And I think the best advice we could give to our buyers is to lower their barriers a little bit, lower their list of must-haves a little bit, and take a look at the houses that have lingered on the market and see if you can determine why. Because if you buy a house that's been on the market 30, 45 days, even longer, odds are you're not negotiating against other buyers. They've rejected it for some reason. And if the reason they've rejected it is determined to be within your tolerances, then you can score there. And it may mean doing a little more work. It may mean even looking at a 203K loan, a construction loan, to give you the money to do the work. But it's an alternative. In other words, I think that buyers right now need to think outside the box.
Mhm.
Are you willing to go one town farther away from the city? What are you willing to do to beat this supply and demand game?
Exactly. And of course, everybody is different with that as
Mhm.
well. It's interesting. You shared a story with me before we came on air about this couple that wanted to live in a particular neighborhood, and in this whole big section of Boston, there are 8 homes on the market, and 4 of them they could afford, and 2 of those they didn't like. And it guess it depends on managing their expectations as much as anything.
Exactly.
And sometimes just saying, you know, I'm going to wait a few months because you and I know that it's not going to stay like this forever.
No, I've lived through 1, 2, 3, 4 seller cycles and 4 buyer cycles. I survived the Great Recession when there was nothing but inventory and prices receded by 10%.
Horrible.
The truth is, there's always a market because people's personal needs, life dictates the market. There's
Mhm.
always a need. In the best of markets, listen, and one of my favorite analogies is if you're living in a studio apartment over a retail store on Newberry Street, like my granddaughter is, and suddenly you're pregnant with twins, God forbid, sha sha poo poo, then you're moving. I don't care what the economy says. I don't care what's going on in the world. Life has dictated to you that you need different housing. And though people still, recession or boom, COVID or not, people are still getting married, people are still having babies. And unfortunately, we're losing loved ones for natural or COVID or whatever. People die every day. So those dictate the need to move.
Mhm. Absolutely. But the other part of it, and I find this sometimes, particularly with first-time buyers, is they're so intense
Right.
about the process that it's difficult sometimes to step back and say, I'm going to put it on hold for a while. The really great thing about our business is that nobody dies. It's not life or death. And there's always another path.
One other bit to think about, people who are renting whose lease is coming due say, oh my God, I have to sign up for another year. And I would say to you, in this climate, no, you don't. You
Mhm.
can tell your landlord, I'd like to go month to month. You can tell your landlord, I want a 6-month lease. There are so many vacancies in the greater Boston area in rentals. Your landlord will be grateful that you've chosen to give him a little more time. And I want to do some more research on this and that, but I believe that if you went month to month, the landlord can't throw you out right now. There's a moratorium on eviction.
Well, that's true. Again, we're not going to argue that you should take advantage of the law to do something that
That is difficult.
morally
Right. But you
uncomfortable.
do not have to agree to a full 1-year extension right now. You could say, I need 3 more months, I need 6 more months, I'm going month to month. Most landlords will be grateful for the continued rental income in a climate where re-renting is getting hard.
Yeah.
So
Again, there are
let's be wise about it. Let's keep our heads on straight. Let's have a game plan and be ready to pounce with the strongest possible offer when something does come on. I always tell my clients, they say, how high should I go?
until it hurts.
Until it hurts. That's exactly right. And what I always say to them is offer a price at which you could sleep well tonight if somebody paid $1 more. And if you would be disappointed if somebody paid $1 more, then you didn't go high enough.
Absolutely. Good advice.
Oh, there you go. We'll get through this. We always do.
Okay, and I will see you next week, same
You
time, same
certainly
station.
shall. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.